Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 17 deadline decisions where I'll discuss your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline and of course discuss the key question, what to do with Matheus Cunha. If you did enjoy today's video, please smash that like button and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So let's start with those press conference updates as of Friday afternoon at 3 PM. And as always, if you enjoy these deadline decisions videos, please make sure to smash that like button and subscribe if you are new. But let's go through what the managers have said around some of the key players. Honestly, not a massive amount in terms of those key assets, but definitely stuff which could affect our decisions. And we'll start with Crystal Palace. Unfortunately, Eze has picked up another injury and he's going to miss out in Game Week 17. This time it doesn't sound particularly serious. Apparently it's a swollen foot. And apparently he should hopefully be available for Bournemouth. But remember that it's only a few days until that Bournemouth game. So let's see how Eze gets on. Honestly, Ismaila Sarr looks fantastic value. So if you really want to go for a Palace asset, you go there. But the entry point isn't great against Arsenal. Munoz is suspended. Eze's injured. It's probably not the time to go all in on Crystal Palace. And we can probably wait until around Game Week 19 anyway. On Fulham, some big news. And I'm actually going to discuss Fulham in a future section in this video because we've got some key information around those cheap defenders. But unfortunately, Tete will be out for at least 8 to 10 weeks. And the comment was at least 8 to 10 weeks. And Anderson is back in training. Why this is important is Anderson is 4.2. But the only other available right back, as of my understanding anyway, for Fulham is Castagna. And we know that Castagna has been wonderful in FPL. He's very attacking. He struggled for fitness himself, but he's only 4.2 as well. So we'll discuss in a future section whether it might be worth going for one of those cheap Fulham assets, but they could both offer really good value. On Bournemouth, Iraola reported no fresh injury concerns, which suggests that probably Semenyo and Eva Nilsson are both fine. We haven't had that fully confirmed, but I feel like that is something that would have cropped up if Semenyo was still struggling. If you're wondering, he did come off earlier, obviously in Game Week 16. Apparently it was hamstring tightness, not a hamstring injury. So I would say by all accounts, it looks like he's okay. Most people are probably either selling or benching anyway, but if you did need to rely on him, this would suggest, let's see what happens on Friday evening, that he's okay. Man City is still struggling with injuries, and the latest is actually Ruben Dias, who's out for 3 to 4 weeks. That's obviously a major blow. He's probably their best centre-back. However, a little bit of positive news for them. Apparently, Akanji is good and Stones is fine. Pepper's almost given up in these press conferences. He gives us very little, but if Akanji is good and Stones is fine, that is also good for Guardiola. Because the issue with Guardiola at the moment is because they don't have enough fully fit centre-backs, Guardiola has to keep playing this sort of left centre-back or even maybe central centre-back role. Whereas obviously if one of Akanji or Stones is back, we could see a situation where he's playing a slightly more advanced role. I would say that in general, though, City look a bit of a shambles at the moment, so you probably don't want to invest in their defence. But if Akanji and Stones are available, good for Guardiola. If you're a Lewis owner, I think Lewis probably does start this one. But the centre-backs being injured is probably actually good for Rico Lewis in terms of being more likely to start, because it means Guardiola has to start as a centre-back, essentially, as they probably want Rico Lewis as the one sort of bombing forward and getting into more advanced positions. On Newcastle, Joelinton is suspended for Game Week 17, so we might see a front three involving Harvey Barnes with Gordon and Isak, or we might just see Willock playing in a more advanced role. And also, Botman played for the the under-21s this week and is nearing a return. This is great news for Newcastle. That will only strengthen their defence. I do wonder, could we see Dan Burn at left back if Botman comes in at centre back alongside Fabian Schär? Lewis Hall has been exceptional, but you never know. It might be a situation that once Botman's back, we saw him actually like Dan Burn at left back previously, Eddie Howe. But yeah, for now, I wouldn't worry as a Lewis Hall owner, but maybe in the future, that's something to consider if Botman can stay fit. On Liverpool, Bradley and Konate do remain out injured. There's no time frame. They're definitely not in full team training at this point. And Slot did comment on the fact that he doesn't want to rush them back and he'd rather take a little bit longer but make sure they are fully fit and available. So I reckon we've probably got a little bit more time with the likes of Gomez probably at centre-back and also without having that major competition for Trent at right-back as well. If you aren't aware, by the way, I saw a few people confused. Robertson actually served his suspension in the EFL Cup. So if it's a red card suspension, you can serve it in the EFL Cup. If it's a yellow card suspension, you can't serve it. The reason for that is people can then get a tactical 5th yellow card and then miss an EFL Cup game and be back to the Premier League. Whereas getting a tactical red card doesn't make much sense, right? So you can serve red card suspensions. And as a result, Robertson is available for Game Week 17, and I would expect him to start. On Brighton, Welbeck is apparently not in the best shape with his ankle injury. Hertzler did go on to say, you never know, he could come back quicker than we think, but it sounds very likely that Welbeck will be unavailable once again. Sadly, I think that makes João Pedro a weaker option, because João Pedro, in his best moments, has been linking up with Welbeck, and Veltman is available for Game Week 17 if anyone owns him. There is a good chance that he plays and that he starts in that game. For Brentford, they picked up a couple of injuries midweek against Newcastle in the EFL Cup. Vandenberg picked up an injury in the warm-up. Apparently it was a minor groin injury, but after the match, Thomas Frank said it's unlikely that he plays, and he also said it's probably unlikely that Pinnock plays because it's a hamstring injury. He seemed a lot more, he sort of made the comments separately, but he seemed a little bit more hesitant about Vandenberg, and with Pinnock, he just said that they don't really have a definitive update. So maybe Pinnock is slightly more likely, but he didn't have a press conference today, so we don't know. We just know basically what we heard after the EFL Cup game. So let's wait and see there. But again, you're probably not hoping to start them in most cases. And if you are, you could maybe look to sell them anyway because they don't have a great run of fixtures. For Manchester United, just to note that Mason Mount will be out for several weeks. The reason I bring that up is it is one less piece of competition for Ahmad. Not only is Rashford looking like he's not even going to be in the squad for the foreseeable future, and if he is, he's definitely not in favour. Mason Mount's injured. Garnacho's come back into the squad but didn't start against Spurs. Obviously, Amad Diallo himself got a little bit of a rest against Spurs. I would be extremely, supremely surprised if Ahmad doesn't start in Game Week 17. And in all honesty, based on what we know right now, he definitely starts at least 8 of the next 10, probably 9 of the next 10. And I wouldn't be surprised if he starts all of the remaining Premier League games for the sort of next couple of months. But things can change very quickly when there's a new manager. But this is good news, not if you're a United fan or Mason Mount, but if you are looking to bring in Ahmad, it's a little bit less competition. Nothing massive on Arsenal, but Rice, Calafiori and Zinchenko are all available for Game Week 17, which is good news in terms of their overall performance. Their team will be a little bit stronger. It does mean with Calafiori and Zinchenko back that Timber probably won't play at left back. I'm almost certain he'll start at right back, but if they wanted to try and do something similar to before where they play Partey at right back and inverts, I guess Timber doesn't have to start this one. But once again, he's just so much better than anyone else they have available in that right back position. So I would imagine that Timber starts, but they are getting defenders back here. And speaking of defenders, Anjon Udogi said the plan is that Destiny should be okay. He said it wasn't an injury and it was fatigue, I believe, in the press conference. But the reason I bring this up is 2 out of the last 3 games, Pedro Porro has been on the bench. If Destiny Udogi is back and fine, and Jed Spencer's actually looked pretty decent since coming in, there is the chance that Porro continues to get the odd rest or piece of rotation in the team. So there we go. Those are the major press conference updates. Obviously, we've also had updates around Cunha. So let's now discuss that in the next section. So guys, in this section, I'm going to discuss Matheus Cunha. And I just want to say, if at the point of you watching this, we already have a more definitive update about whether he is or isn't banned, please feel free to skip this section. There's plenty more value later in the video where I talk about some other stuff. But I, of course, need to cover this because at the time we're recording, we do have some updates, but we don't have anything definitive either way. And a lot of you, and I mean like probably over 50% of the questions for this video was around Matheus Cunha. So let's discuss what do we do with him. So firstly, in the press conference with the new Wolves manager, Vitor Pereira, he's given a bit of a Pep Guardiola Arteta response, but they asked, is Cunha available? And he said, I'm not sure he is an important player. It reminds me of Pep when he says they're like a wonderful human being. He probably wasn't going to give us anything anyway. And in all honesty, he was probably told by the higher-ups, if you get asked about Cunha, just say that he's very important to the club, but you're not sure. So he's probably answered this in the way that he was supposed to. But we got nothing really from the press conference. However, after the press conference, a couple of journalists linked to Wolves with Liam Keane and Nathan, they basically updated us and said that at the point of them tweeting, which was around 2:33 p.m, Matheus Cunha is free to play on Sunday against Leicester because Wolves are yet to hear from the FA on any potential ban. And of course, until the FA contact them, well, then he's free to play. I've heard a few accounts suggesting, and this does make sense, apparently they weren't presented with a ban, they were presented with the charges. So Cunha was probably charged for whatever they wanted to call it, the elbow to the back of the head and the grab of the glasses. So they were presented with the charges, and as a result, all they had to do was respond to the charges, answer them. So there wasn't a ban and an appeal as such. It was a presentation of the charges and a response to that charge that they were given. So if that's the case, even if they decide not to appeal it, no ban has been put forward yet, and there's probably going to have to be a hearing of some sort too. So the more I think about this, and this isn't just because I want him to be available, because in all honesty, we'll discuss at the end, it doesn't really affect my team either way. I'm starting to lean towards he probably is going to be available. Because even if they don't appeal it, well then they need to go through the stages of putting a ban together, proposing the ban to Wolves. And if they have appealed it, then absolutely there's going to have to be a hearing of some kind, in which case that definitely won't take place before the Leicester game. It might even be that this isn't before the Manchester United game. It might be that we get a few more game weeks with Matheus Cunha. Now, I'm just hypothesizing. It might be that 20 minutes after me recording this, we find out that Cunha's banned for the next 10 games, but I don't know. And this isn't a discussion of whether I think he should be banned, because I absolutely do. You can't do that on a football pitch. You shouldn't do that anywhere in the world, really, but especially on a football pitch on TV. You can't do that, but that isn't the discussion here. It's whether he'll be available. So, to recap, I think at the moment, based on the info we have, he should be fine. Therefore, I would probably be keeping Cunha in most cases. What would be the situation where I wouldn't keep Cunha? Two ways. I think if you've got absolutely no bench cover and you are really, really worried that if he misses out, you're basically down to 10 men, or you've got someone like Diblingham off the bench who, by the way, under the new manager, could do something. But let's say you're just like really not very happy with who you have coming off the bench, or your 8th attacker is injured, or you don't have Alexander Isak. I think they are the only two positions right now where I would sell Cunha, if you've not already done it, that you're just so desperate to get to Isak, or that you just don't have the cover. So if I just go to my team, and I'll discuss my team in a little bit more detail towards the back end of the video, I've already got Isak in place, and I've got a 5-man midfield of Saka, Rodgers, Enzo, Palmer, Salah. So yes, with my 1 free transfer, I could sell Matheus Cunha very easily, and then play a 3-4-3, but I don't need to do that this week. And when I don't love many of the forwards, it feels like I don't need to rush him out, because on the odd chance that he does, and it's looking more likely actually that he plays Leicester, there aren't many players that are going to be better than Matheus Cunha against Leicester. New manager bounce as well, probably still on penalties. Leicester have been shipping chances under Rude. It feels like a very good game for him. If I were to replace him, we're going to discuss him a little bit later, but Raul Jimenez is good in terms of the fixtures, but the minutes are a bit of a worry. But this week against Southampton at home, it doesn't get much better than that. I still really like Mateta. My issue with Mateta is it's not a very good entry point, and I'm still a little bit worried that he's got 60-minute subs in the last 2 games. I kind of feel like I want to wait until around game week 19 for Mateta. The really obvious one, and the one that will be most popular, is Chris Wood. I don't mind it. He ticks along so nicely. His minutes tend to be pretty good. He's already on 10 goals this season. He's on penalties. The fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag, right? Brentford has now become a red fixture, by the way, which is crazy. Spurs, Everton, Wolves, Southampton in there. Yeah, he's got a couple of tricky games, but it doesn't inspire me. So I'll go back to it and say, in most cases, I'd probably keep Cunha unless we get a negative update. The only player that I would just be happy to sell Cunha for at the moment is Isak, because I just think this week it's a great fixture. I love these fixtures for him. Each one you can give good justification that it works. Like these 3 are going to be really transition-based games, which is where Isak thrives. I suppose there's some conversation around Nicholas Jackson. Like if you can get from Cunha to Jackson, Jackson is also an extremely elite forward in FPL. He's not far off Isak. But this week against Everton away, I think I'd prefer Cunha, probably, on penalties against Leicester away. So I probably wouldn't make that move. So there we go. Hopefully that is clear. Just to go back to it then, I'm going to be keeping Cunha, because even if he is banned, I can play a 3-5-2. The only player that I'd be desperate to sell him for is Isak, but I wouldn't do it for a hit. I'd probably only do that for free. Don't mind going for Jackson. And if you want to go for a cheaper price, it's probably Wood or Raul Jimenez for me. Let me know what your plan is with Matheus Cunha. So now that we've got through the news and obviously the Cunha update, I thought a nice place to start before we discuss some of your other questions and also my team. I've got a wildcard draft at the end of the video as well. I thought I'd show you this graphic from Rob T FPL. We absolutely love Rob on this channel. All content creators do, because he creates these really wonderful graphics around projected goals, clean sheet odds, how likely a player is to score as well. So go follow him on Twitter or Blue Sky, wherever you are most active. He does some really great stuff, and the graphics just look very clean. But as you can see here, these are the projected goals scored according to the SpreadX data for each of the teams, and also the clean sheet odds as well. A few things stand out to me. I'm not going to discuss captaincy in detail in this video because Mohamed Salah has been unbelievable this season. We've recently watched Spurs ship so many goals whilst playing at home. We've just watched Palmer get an 18-pointer against Spurs as well away. it's just all pointing towards Salah. And then when you look at the market odds and Liverpool have the highest projected goals, I need a lot for me to back against Salah. Like, I'm probably a bigger Salah fanboy than a lot of other people. I started the season with Salah and without Haaland. That's how much I backed him. I then obviously made the switch. Let's not talk about that. But I think he's great. And so for me, my mantra with captaincy at the moment, someone has to offer me a hell of a lot more than Salah in terms of fixture projected goals for me to want to back against him. So this just points towards Salah captaincy. The other three teams that are projected to get more than 2 goals is Fulham against Southampton. We'll discuss Raul Jimenez in a second because the minutes are worrying, but if he plays, it's great. A Iwobi for a cheap asset. If you want an attacking defender, as we'll discuss in a second, they've got them. So it's looking really good for Fulham here in terms of going forward. Chelsea, despite Everton being a pretty good defence, they're still projected over 2 goals. It goes to show how good the Chelsea attack is. And then Newcastle are sat there right on 2 goals against Ipswich. Obviously, the likes of Arsenal and Manchester United definitely approach into, and then after that, there's a bit of a drop-off. So those are the attacks that you want to back. Very interesting that Wolves are down at 1.5. I would expect that to be higher, but then again, are Wolves a better team than Leicester? Probably not particularly, unless the new manager gets a lot out of them. You can actually see Leicester are projected to get more goals than Wolves in this game. So we're hopeful for Cunha, but maybe don't expect a ridiculous amount for him, at least according to the SpreadX data here. The interesting thing for me this week is the clean sheet odds, because we have a team that is top with Arsenal, and it's not very often that with Arsenal, I would say like an average fixture, that another team is sort of equal with them. Arsenal are usually very clear at the top, but Fulham are also sat there on 38%. This tells me 2 things. Arsenal defence are absolutely elite and continue to be some of the best options available. The next thing is Fulham defence for this week is really, really good. You can see here, equal 38%, the most likely to keep a clean sheet. And the third thing is no one's above 40%. I tend to find when I'm looking at market odds and SpreadX data, whatever you want to call it, the bookies odds here, anything over 40% is a really good chance for a clean sheet. Whenever I see that 40% number, I'm like, that means that the bookies in this occasion are backing a clean sheet quite heavily. No one's above 40% this week. So I'm not saying that there won't be clean sheets, but there's probably a projection for slightly fewer clean sheets than there have been recently. And I am aware that we've had very few clean sheets this season. You can see Chelsea are up there in 3rd as well, Newcastle in 4th. But then after that, we're below 30%. So the ideal back line this week, if we're looking at clean sheet potential, is a Fulham defender, a couple of Arsenal, and maybe 1 Chelsea. And so I'm sat there at the moment with Sanchez, Gabriel, Robinson, and Trent. So I'm feeling quite comfortable in terms of clean sheet potential. But yeah, I think this is a nice place to start. I find these graphics super helpful from Rob. So feel free to follow Rob. But off the back of this graphic, seeing that not only are Fulham 2nd for projected goals, but most importantly, joint 1st for clean sheet potential, let's discuss those Fulham defenders. So as we discussed in the press conference update section at the start of the video, Tete is out for the next 8 to 10 weeks at least. And obviously Anderson is back in training, who is definitely first choice centre-back for Fulham. So the question comes, with Anderson back in training and Tete injured, would you save the 0.6 million and go for Anderson or Castagna ahead of Anthony Robinson? Maybe, probably. I kind of slightly do regret moving early on Robinson. I will say a couple of things before we discuss how good value Anderson and Castagna could be. Most of us that brought in Robinson this week probably moved for him when he was 4.7. So it's 0.5 million, a little bit of copium there. And also, he arguably does justify the extra 0.5. The man is on 6 assists already this season. He has played 90 minutes in every game this season. And in the previous 2 seasons, he's had over 3,000 minutes in both of them, starting 35 and 37 games. So with Robinson, he starts every game, plays 90 minutes in every game, and his fitness and injury record is exceptionally strong. And, like I said, 6 assists is the most in the Premier League out of all defenders this season. So you are paying an extra 0.6 million now, but you could argue that that is justified when there are issues with both Castagna and Anderson. Anderson, we don't know if he's going to start this week. It could be Diop and Bassi once again. They might decide to just ease him back in, because if we are looking at their upcoming games, they've got Chelsea and Bournemouth after Southampton. You don't want to risk Anderson getting re-injured and then not having him for those 2, so they could ease him back in. But in the press conference, Marco Silva said, Anderson is back. it was Anderson is back. It was quite a short, and it was just like, well, he's probably just going to go straight back into the 11 then. But there is that doubt. And obviously, if he doesn't start this week, well, then you're bringing him in for Chelsea and Bournemouth, but it doesn't feel as good. On Castagna, it looks extremely likely that Castagna is probably going to be the right back. So if we just jump over to the FPL site, I mean, this is their list of defenders. Just to go through, Robinson's a left back, Tete's injured, Bassey's a centre back, Anderson's a centre back, Diop's a centre back, Castagna can play left back or right back, but we know that he's right footed. Cuenca is a centre back or a left back, Sessegnon's a left back, and Amissa is a centre back or a left back. So none of these players have played right back. In fact, out of the starting 11, do you know who's the only one that could probably play right back right now? It's probably Alex Iwobi, or they might switch to sort of a 5-back where they play like with wing backs, and then again, Alex Iwobi might be more suited. I'm not saying that that will happen, but it's basically Castagna's got to start. People are suggesting, does that mean therefore that they might go out in the January transfer market and try and sign someone? I doubt it, because as of February, Tete's probably going to be back, and he's been very good. I was actually just on Twitter as well, just making sure that I was up to date with everything. And this guy's just reported, Jack Kelly's just reported that with Tete injured, it looks like Ollie Gofford has been training with the first team as backup right back for Castagna. So, and again, this person's also said Iwobi could fill that role as well. So, yeah, it's looking very, very good for Castagna's minutes. It looks like it will be him as the starting right back. So then if we go back to that question, would I rather Castagna at 4.2 or Robinson at 4.8? Probably Castagna. I might be willing to take the risk. All I would say is Castagna has been comfortably benched. He's only been injured, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks this season. So Tete has just been much better than Castagna and very much first choice. And this is no disrespect to Tete. He's been very good this season, but that says a lot about where Castagna's at in terms of the pecking order and his performances. So just because he's had some attacking threat in the past and just because he's cheap doesn't mean that he's going to go out there and match Anthony Robinson. And we don't know for sure that he'll start every game. We could see a situation where they chuck one of the centre-backs at right back. So there is some doubt, whereas like I said, with Anthony Robinson, there is absolutely no doubt. Also, Castagna has suffered, I think it's 6 hamstring injuries in the last 4 or 5 years. So he does have a bit of a record for struggling with a hamstring injury. Even this season, I think the time that he was out injured was with a hamstring injury. Would I take the risk? I would be very, very tempted if that extra 0.6 million gets you something quite big. Like if that 0.6 allows you to go for Isak rather than Jackson, and no disrespect to Jackson, but Isak's better for me, then it's worth it. If that extra 0.6 gets you Trent over Van Dijk, it's worth it. And that's why I start to come back to just thinking I would be very tempted to do it. But there is a risk with both of them. Anderson long-term is a much safer option than Castagna because you know he'll start every game. But Castagna probably's got the higher upside. I'll leave the decision with you. All I will say is I've already brought in Robinson. I'm very happy I did it. If I was making the choice fresh right now, I love Castagna, so I'd be very, very tempted there. It's difficult to say, though. It's very easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, I'll take a risk on Castagna. Maybe if I was put in the position again, I would still go for Anthony Robinson. What do you think? Let me know what you're planning with the Fulham Defenders. What I will say is if you look at the fixtures, I definitely would be targeting a Fulham defender this week. So I had a couple of questions around rotation risk, but this specific question said, how do you feel about some of the higher upside rotation risks like Jimenez and Jota, the 2 Js? I see the potential, but not sure about the risk. I could go through and talk about, like, I think Jimenez will play 70 minutes in this game and 65 in this one and be benched in this, but I'm just guessing. And it's the same with Jota at this stage. I don't know if both start this weekend. I don't know if both start on Boxing Day, and that is the major issue. I will say, I'm going to try and answer this in a different way. I'm going to try and answer this in a more general way of how I think you should decide about rotation risks. 2 things. Firstly, what state is your squad currently in? Do you currently have 7 other really nailed attackers? Is your defense looking really good? How many free transfers do you have? Do you have money in the bank? What is your chip strategy moving forward? These are all decisions which might allow you to come to a better decision about whether it's worth the risk. If you've got 7 penalty taking nailed forwards, your back 3 is looking really strong, you're happy with your goalkeeper, and you've got 3 free transfers, yeah, do you know what? Going for Jimenez or Jota is probably not a major issue. You get it wrong, you just take them out. But if you're sat there with 2 good defenders, 3 of your defenders are injured, you've already got someone that's injured or suspended in your midfield, then it's probably not worth the risk. The thing is, when these players are on the bench, they're very likely to come off the bench. So it's not like you really necessarily need your bench, but you just don't want to bring in a player that you don't know that's going to start. So the first thing is the rest of your squad set up in a good enough way that you can take the risk you think with that one player? And the next thing, and arguably the most important thing, what is your management style? Like, what do you enjoy with FPL? For me, I genuinely hate, and this shows how much of a nerd I am, but when I own someone that's a rotation risk, I am sat there with an hour and 15 minutes until their game kicks off, refreshing the Twitter page of the team that they play for, waiting for the lineup, because I'm nervous, because I'm like, oh, if they don't play, that's one of my 11 players that's probably going to blank or not do very well. Especially if they've got a good fixture, like Raul Jimenez against Southampton this week. I can guarantee if you own Raul Jimenez, you are going to be nervous whether he starts. And then Jota against Leicester at home on Boxing Day, you're going to be nervous as to whether he starts. You're going to be refreshing the page. So I feel like you need to be a very specific type of person and manager to be willing to have these rotation risks in your team. But for other people, they're like, I don't want to bring in bloody Chris Wood, who's going to just tick along nicely, or Enzo Fernandez, who I know is going to start, but is going to get me 5 points. I want to go for those players that could go absolutely massive. And with Jimenez, I don't think his ceiling is that massive, but with the fixtures being probably on penalties, he does have a relatively high ceiling. And Diogo Jota, if he starts that Leicester game, that's a massive score. And even if he starts the Spurs game, we've seen how vulnerable Spurs are defensively. So yeah, it probably is potentially worth the risk, but the rest of your team needs to be in a good position, and you need to be the sort of manager that doesn't mind that emotional turmoil of not knowing if your player is going to start. So for me, I'm probably not going to do it, because I am not really the sort of manager that likes taking risks with minutes. I want to bring in nailed assets going into nice fixture runs where I don't have to stress too much about whether they're going to start or not, which is why I brought in Anthony Robinson. It's why I like players like Matheus Cunha. If he's not suspended, then those are the players that I kind of want to own in FPL. Let me know what you think around these two. In terms of what do I expect their minutes to be like, I expect Jimenez to start 4 of the next 5. I do think he'll be benched in one of them. As to which one, I've got no idea. Time frame wise, the Chelsea game makes the most sense, but it could be the Southampton game. For Jota, I think he could start as few as 2 or 3 of the next 5, probably 3 of the next 5. If you get 4 out of the next 5 from Jota, well, then he's a seriously spicy option. Let me know if you're considering either of the two of them and how you feel about rotation risks. So guys, I did build a wildcard draft because there are a lot of people asking just to think about the general structure. And honestly, I'm not overly happy with this because there is no Nicholas Jackson, who is a player that I would really like in a wildcard, but you have to sacrifice somewhere, and I will discuss that. If you do want to get a 30-day free trial from Fantasy Football Hub, if you are planning your wildcard, or you just want to look at fixture rotations or points projections or all of the wonderful stuff that they have available on their website, they are currently offering a 30-day free trial and 30% off if you decide to sign up at the end of that free trial. Definitely check it out. It's very useful over this busy period. So I've built a wildcard draft over there. I do have pretty decent team value, despite the fact that my rank isn't perfect at 350k-ish. But my team value is pretty decent. So if you can't afford this, it becomes even more tricky. But we'll go through it. In goal, I've gone for the Fabianski-Henderson double. The reason I've gone Fabianski and Henderson is, well, Fabianski is one of the only cheap goalkeepers starting. And I just think Henderson from GW17 onwards at 4.4 million offers so much value. And for the next 2, you can just start Fabianski for Brighton and Southampton, and then Henderson comes in for Southampton himself. So you get Southampton in back-to-back games, you get Henderson, but you can cover him over the next 2 when the fixtures aren't ideal with Fabianski. So I kind of like that pairing. Of course, you could go for David Raya, but as I said, money is very difficult. I'm trying to not be biased here, but I have gone for my exact back 3 in my own team, which is Gabriel, Robinson, Trent. You could drop Robinson all the way to a very cheap defender and start Castagna, right? You don't have to go for double Fulham defence. And I know a lot of people say, why have you gone double Fulham defence? Firstly, they're a great defence with great fixtures, but most weeks you probably wouldn't start Castagna. He's just there in case you do want to play a 4 at the back in 1 week, or in case you do pick up a short-term injury to Gabriel or Trent, you've got someone with good fixtures that can come in. Munoz is also in there. I know he's suspended this week, but you don't need him this week, and I would just love to have Munoz in place. For me, the non-negotiables would be Gabriel and Munoz. I think you could go without Trent, and you could go with only one of Robinson, Castagna, Anderson. You don't have to go with 2 of them, but I just think Trent's upside, especially with double game at 24, very likely to happen, and the fixtures, on a wildcard, I'd be very tempted to have him in there. In terms of the midfield, I have gone for that structure of the 3 premiums plus 2 cheaper assets. I've gone Palmer, Salah, Saka, and then I've gone Ahmad and Ismail Assar. The reason I've gone Sarr is because I think if you have Ahmad or Enzo, you don't have to play Sarr over the next 2 fixtures. Like, Ahmad's got Bournemouth and Wolves, Enzo's got Everton, and then I think it's Fulham after that. But 2 decent fixtures in a row. So if you have Enzo or Ahmad, you can have Sarr. You can't have Sarr and Rodgers, really, because well, I guess you could play Rodgers this week and then Sarr next week, but I just think that rotation works relatively well. And I just think Ahmad and Sarr probably have the highest upside. They're both playing sort of right number 10 roles for their teams. They've got a lot of attacking threat. I just really like Ahmad and Sarr. I think they're the 2 players that have the highest goal threat at that cheaper price. So that's the midfield 5. And then the 3 forwards, I've gone Isak, Wood, and João Pedro. You could absolutely go for some different assets in here. Like, rather than João Pedro, you could go down to a 5.5 million forward like Jimenez. That will save you some money. You could potentially go for either Nilsson in there or Wisser if you wanted to. But Isak, he's been so good. It would be one of the main reasons you would want to wildcard. I'd have him. João Pedro, I think, still offers really nice value, although I'd be tempted by Raul Jimenez. And then Chris Wood will just tick along really nicely, and he's not a bad price point either. So the main thing I don't like, because outside of this one thing I like it really is Nicholas Jackson. I think the only place that you can downgrade is Trent. So I think it comes down to, do you want Trent and Jackson, or do you want, I think it's like a 5.8 million asset in defense. So you could basically go down to like Timber, and there, or yeah, probably Timber I would go for. I don't think there's anyone else that I'd be desperate for at that price. And then Nicholas Jackson. So Timber and Jackson versus Wood and Trent is very, very close, but I just think I'd want some Liverpool defensive cover. The other option you have is you could, of course, go for Alisson in goal and then use a bit of the money there and then go for a cheaper defender. So you could go for the Liverpool asset in Alisson, who's only 5.4 million. There are lots of possibilities, but most of that team would be roughly how it is there. If you're wildcarding this week, let me know, and hopefully that's been helpful for you. So guys, just to finish up with my own team, I sort of spoke about it throughout the video, and you guys probably know what my plan is right now. But as things stand, I've already made 8 Nuri to Robinson as a transfer on Sunday evening. So that was one of my transfers. I do have a second one available, and I have 1 million in the bank. So yes, I could sell Cunha, but as I spoke about, none of the forwards fill me with that much excitement. Like, if I knew Jimenez was going to start, it's a possibility, but then I still think he creates the same headache moving forward, that his minutes aren't particularly good. Even when he starts, he's coming off around 70, and he's not necessarily shown that much attacking threat in recent weeks anyway, and Menezes looked quite good. I just don't want to bring in Chris Wood. Nothing against the man. I'm sure he'll continue to score goals. I just don't think it will be at a high enough rate to make me want him in my team. And honestly, if Cunha doesn't get banned against United and Spurs, I might keep him. I might even start him. Like, there's no one that's really standing out to me right now. Mateta in Game Week 19 is tempting for me, but if I can put off that decision, I will. So if Cunha plays, he plays. Let's say that he doesn't. Let's say that I make the decision to keep him, but after the deadline, for some reason, or even before the deadline, Cunha is banned. I just play Rodgers. Man City. Man City have been defending terribly. And then it just doesn't give me a benching headache, at least. It does make my bench pretty weak. I've then at that stage pretty much only got Rico Lewis. But when I look at the players in my team, I'm pretty hopeful most of them would start anyway. And if I need Rico Lewis off the bench, I need Rico Lewis off the bench. So that's the plan right now. I do have the option of course, removing Rodgers for Ahmad. So with that transfer, rather than using it on the forwards, is do Rodgers to Ahmad and then have a 3-5-2 where my 2 cheap midfielders are Enzo and Ahmad, which I think is a very strong position to be in. With Rodgers, his data recently has been pretty rubbish. I say that. Overall, like, there's been a couple of games where it's been like 0.08 against Nottingham Forest, not great, but 0.72 against Southampton was decent. 0.57 against Brentford's pretty decent. 0 against Chelsea. 0.23 here. There's been some good and some bad. My concern is that overall the goal threat this season hasn't been particularly high. And just Villa's general performances, I just always, when I watch Rodgers, it's frustrating. I think there's a little bit of sort of shiny new toy bias here where I just want Ahmad because I've owned Rodgers since like game week 3 or 4. And I just want something a bit different. But if I look at these fixtures here, this is a really nice run for Aston Villa. Brighton at home, Leicester at home, Everton away, they're not bad. I don't have to play him in 22 because remember, in 22, Enzo's got Wolves at home. So I don't have to play him in that one. By the way, I might not play him in a lot of these. I might start Enzo instead. Or if I go in a 3-5-2. But then he's also got West Ham, Wolves, Ipswich. I don't mind holding Rodgers the more I think about it, but I would ideally like Ahmad slightly more in that position. So basically, I think my 2 options as things stand is, well, it all involves keeping Cunha. It's just, do I sell Rodgers for Ahmad? I think if I know that Cunha is going to be available, I probably won't sell Rodgers because then that will involve benching Enzo, and I don't think I want to do that. There is some discussion of, do I just start Rodgers ahead of Enzo? Like, even if Cunha is available, do I just start Rodgers? Because actually, Everton have probably been better defensively than City. There's not a lot of key decisions for me. Like, captaincy is relatively locked in. Goalkeeper decision, I don't think it's that difficult this week. Defence, I think it picks itself. So I'm largely there. I think it's a decent team. Yes, there's lots of away fixtures, but I'm not too stressed. So that is the current plan. Let me know what your plan is. And let me know what you think about my cheap midfield situation. And obviously, if we get a Cunha update by the time you're watching this, I apologise. But we'll discuss that in more detail on the deadline stream tomorrow. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 17 deadline decisions video. Hopefully that has been helpful for you. And if it has, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. I do really appreciate it. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.